My name is Eli. I'm 38 years old, divorced, no kids, and until about a year ago, I worked in marketing for a mid-sized media company in Chicago. It wasn't a bad life, just one that gradually started to feel like someone else's. After the divorce, which I won't get into, I packed my stuff, took what little I had in savings, and got the hell out of the city. I ended up in a small town a few hours south. It's not the kind of place you'd find on a map unless you were looking for. That was the appeal. Quiet, cheap, forgettable. A restart. The house I moved into was one of those. 2-good-2-true Craigslist finds. 3 bedrooms, detached garage, finished basement. It's all for less than half what I was paying for a studio apartment back in the city. I figured the catch was just the location, middle of nowhere. The fact that the place hadn't been updated since the 70s. But that was fine by me. I wasn't looking for luxury. I just wanted to be left alone. The first couple weeks were peaceful. I spent most of my time organizing the garage, refinishing old furniture, going for long drives to nowhere. I didn't even set up Wi-Fi for the first month. That was the point. To detox. To think. To disappear a little. It wasn't until mid-September that things started feeling off. It began with little things. Noticed a drawer in the kitchen was open when I knew I hadn't used it. A light in the laundry room I was sure I'd turned off. That kind of stuff. It's easy to brush those moments off when you live alone. You tell yourself you're just tired or distracted, but that uneasy feeling started to build. A tension, like the house was watching me, waiting for something. The first time I heard the humming, I was down in the basement organizing shelves. I had an old stereo plugged into the wall, but it wasn't on. Still, this soft, rhythmic hum seemed to bleed through the concrete. Faint, just barely there. I froze, held my breath, and listened. And it stopped. It was enough to make me think I'd imagined it. Maybe the pipes, maybe a distant lawnmower, but it didn't feel right. Felt close. Like someone was humming a lullaby with their lips almost touching the wall. I didn't go into the basement much after that. A few nights later, I was brushing my teeth when I heard what sounded like footsteps. Not upstairs, not on the porch beneath. Me. I live alone, remember? No pets, no roommates. I turned off the faucet and stood there, toothpaste still foaming in my mouth, listening. The sound was slow, deliberate, like someone pacing across a tight space. I walked out of the bathroom and stood at the top of the stairs, staring into the darkened basement. The door was cracked open just slightly. My heart was pounding. I didn't want to go down there, but I also didn't want to be that guy in horror movies who just locks his door and pretends everything's fine, so I grabbed a flashlight and went down. The air was cold. Colder than usual, swept the light across the old wooden shelves, the laundry machines, the cement floor. Nothing. I moved slowly toward the back wall, and that's when I noticed it. In the far left corner, behind a stack of broken chairs and a few old paint cans, there was a metal panel, square, about 2 feet wide, flush with the concrete. I'd never seen it before. The paint surrounding it was slightly discolored, like someone had recently moved things around it. I crouched and gave it a tug. Didn't budge at first. I had to get a crowbar from the garage. When I finally pried it open, the smell hit me first, damp earth and rot. The kind of smell you feel in the back of your throat. Behind the panel was a short tunnel. It's not dirt, but concrete. Old, maybe part of a root cellar or an old utility chamber. The tunnel was maybe 4 feet tall, just wide enough to crawl through. It extended 10, maybe 12 feet, then dipped to the right. I couldn't see where it ended. No part of me wanted to go in there. I shut the panel and stacked the chairs back in front of it. Then I went upstairs, double-locked the basement door, and tried to convince myself it was just some weird architectural leftover from before the house was remodeled, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next few days were worse. I'd wake up and find mud tracked into the laundry room. The chairs I'd stacked were knocked over. One morning, my toothbrush was wet, and I know I hadn't used it yet. I bought cameras. Basic motion-triggered ones from the hardware store. Set one up in the living room, one in the hallway by the basement door, and one pointing directly at that hidden panel. That night, I barely slept. Just laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting. When I reviewed the footage the next morning, I saw it. 3:12 a.m., the metal panel creaked open. A pale figure crawled out on all fours, thin, shirtless, filthy. He paused near the tunnel's exit, then stood up tall, maybe 6 feet 3 inches or more. He didn't look at the camera. Just stood there in the corner for nearly a minute. Then he walked into my laundry room, looked around. He leaned down and sniffed the clothes in my hamper, picked up my hoodie, wore it, then disappeared down the hallway out of frame. Felt sick. I called the cops. To their credit, they showed up fast. 2 cars. They searched the house top to bottom. I showed them the footage, but by the time we checked the crawl space, it was empty. Just a tunnel leading into darkness. They called in another team to help, but it didn't matter. Whoever he was, whatever he was gone. The lead officer, a guy named Harris, told me he'd seen this kind of thing before. Squatters living inside walls, crawl spaces, even attics. People going completely unnoticed for months. Said it happens more often than you'd think. They found scraps of food, water bottles, even a blanket stuffed into a recessed part of the crawl space. It looked like a nest. But the part that really shook me, Harris said he didn't think this guy had just moved in recently. The way the tunnel was worn, the claw marks on the wall, smell. This guy's been living here for a while, he said. Could be a year, could be longer. I asked if they were going to find him. He didn't answer. They helped me seal the panel. I had a contractor come in the next day to pour concrete over the whole corner. I also had steel bars installed over the basement windows, replaced the doors, got a full alarm system installed. Every night since then, I check the cameras before I sleep. So far, nothing. I haven't moved. I don't really know why. Maybe because running won't change the fact that for God knows how long, someone was living just feet beneath me, watching me, learning my habits, sleeping underneath my floorboards. Or maybe because a part of me still doesn't believe it's over. Some nights, I wake up at exactly 3:12 a.m., drenched in sweat, listening. And sometimes I still hear humming.
My name is Jacob, and until last November, I would have said I was a rational person. I'm not someone who jumps to ghosts, demons, or anything supernatural. I'm not wired that way. But after what happened to me in the Monongahela forest, I can't think of any other explanation that makes sense. And believe me, I've tried. I was 23 at the time, finishing up my last semester of college. My younger brother, Nate, had died 6 months earlier in a car accident. He was 19. We'd been kind of close, where you don't need to say much to understand each other. After he died, I couldn't focus. School felt like a joke. I started skipping classes. My professors were lenient at first, but that faded. What I really needed was to get away. So I did. I'd always been into backpacking, and there was this stretch of forest I'd been wanting to explore for years, a no-service zone deep in Monongahela, miles off the main trails. Nobody goes out there unless they know what they're doing. That's what I wanted. Isolation, silence, somewhere Nate had never been, so I wouldn't be haunted by memories. I set out on a Friday morning with 4 days worth of supplies. The plan was simple: hike in 8 miles, set up camp, spend a couple days alone, and then hike back out Monday morning. I didn't tell anyone exactly where I was going, just that I was heading into the woods. That was mistake number 1. The first day was normal. Hard hiking, cold wind, but nothing I hadn't dealt with before. I reached a clearing near a dry riverbed and set up camp under a cluster of white pines. It was late afternoon, and the sun filtered through the branches like stained glass. Peaceful. That night, I lit a fire and cooked ramen. I wrote in my journal, mostly random thoughts, some of them about Nate. Around 10 p.m., I crawled into my tent and fell asleep to the rustling of wind through the trees. Day 2 was quiet. I explored the area, found an old game trail, followed it for a mile or two, and circled back. I was starting to feel like I could finally breathe again. I made another fire that night and sat beside it, sipping tea from a metal cup. It was cold enough that I could see my breath. That's when I heard it. A voice. Behind me. Just over my right shoulder. Low, calm, familiar. Jake. I spun around, heart in my throat, and shined my flashlight toward the trees. Nothing. I stood up, listening hard. My ears were ringing from the sudden adrenaline spike. The fire cracked behind me. Jake. This time, it was clearer. It was Nate, I swear on my life. It was his voice. I shouted his name, more out of instinct than belief. My voice echoed through the trees, and then silence. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up in my tent with the flashlight on, jumping at every creak of the branches, every snap of a twig. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe it was wind, carrying someone else's voice from miles away. The forest does weird things with sound. At dawn, I forced myself out of the tent. I made coffee with shaking hands. No sign of anything unusual. No footprints, no animals nearby. Still, I was rattled. I considered hiking back, but that felt like defeat. I convinced myself it was grief. Stress. I'd been writing about Nate, thinking about Nate. Of course, I imagined his voice. That's what I told myself. The third night was when it got worse. I made a fire again. I didn't want to, but it was too cold not to. I sat close, hood pulled tight, sipping the last of my tea. The woods were silent. Then, just past midnight, the voice returned. Why did you leave me, Jake? This time it was longer, closer. I stood up, shining my light. Nothing, but I felt the presence, like someone was watching from the dark. Come with me. I ran to the tent, zipped it shut, and grabbed the small knife I kept in my pack. My hands were numb. My breath felt too loud. I pressed record on my phone and let it run, just in case. I stayed like that for hours. In the morning, I played back the recording. Nothing, just the fire. The wind. Not a single voice, but I know what I heard. That afternoon, I found something beside the fire pit. A photo, a printout, an old picture of me and Nate on a camping trip when we were kids, maybe 10 and 6. It was burned around the edges. I didn't bring that photo. I checked my pack 3 times. Every pocket. Nothing like it. My stomach dropped. I wanted to believe someone was playing a trick, but I was 8 miles deep in the forest. No one knew I was there. I decided to leave first. Thing in the morning, that night, I didn't light a fire. I stayed in the tent, fully clothed, knife in hand, light off. Around 2:30 a.m., the tent fabric rippled like something brushed against it. Then came the voice, right outside. It wasn't supposed to be me, Jake. The zipper trembled. I held my breath, too terrified to move. And then, a laugh. Nate's laugh, but twisted. Slowed down, like a recording played on dead batteries. It lasted too long. I blacked out at some point. I don't even remember falling asleep. When I woke up, it was morning. The zipper was still closed. Everything was in place, but outside the tent, sitting neatly beside the cold fire pit, was a tattered hoodie. Nate's HOODIE.blue, with the frayed cuffs. I remembered him wearing it the day he died. I packed everything in 5 minutes and hiked out. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I didn't look back. Not once. When I got home, I checked the voice recordings again. Still nothing, but in one clip near the end, just as I'm zipping up the tent, there's a faint sound, a single breath, and then he said he wasn't dead. I never played it again. I sent the photo and the hoodie to my mom, told her I found them while cleaning. She hung the photo in her hallway. She thinks it's sweet, that it was some kind of sign from Nate. Maybe she's right, but I haven't gone back into the woods since. I don't sleep through the night anymore, because sometimes, especially on cold, quiet nights, I still hear him, laughing, calling my name from just beyond the trees, asking why I left.
My name's Mark. I'm 32, divorced, and I work underground. Not in some metaphorical sense. Literally, I'm a maintenance subcontractor for city infrastructure, mostly utilities, sometimes old subway lines. I fix what needs fixing. I see what others don't want to. 2 years ago, I was sent on a job that changed the way I look at the world. I've only told one person since, my brother, and Even he looked at me like I needed help. Maybe I do. But everything I'm about to tell you happened. Every word. It was a Saturday in late July. My company got an early morning call from a city engineer. Something about an old station underneath Roosevelt Line sealed off decades ago after a partial collapse. Apparently, a new sensor showed elevated humidity and CO2 readings coming from one of the sealed shafts. Just check it out. Snap a few photos, log the air levels, and mark anything dangerous, my boss said. You're not patching anything up. Just ease on. It was supposed to be a two-man job. I was supposed to go down with a guy named Vince, but he called in sick last minute. Our foreman didn't care. He told me to go solo and be quick. He was more worried about overtime than safety. I didn't push back. I should have. Access was through a locked maintenance room in the lowest level of the active 56th Street station. The place was already a relic: grimy walls, old signage, humming lights that buzzed like mosquitoes. The maintenance room was behind a steel door with no markings. I'd never noticed it before. Inside was a shaft with a bolted ladder that dropped maybe 30 feet down into darkness. I lowered myself slowly, boots hitting wet concrete at the bottom. My headlamp cut through a low-ceiling passage just wide enough. For a person, the air was thick, stale, like something that had been locked away for too long. I walked for 10 minutes, maybe more. There were old power lines overhead, most dead, some humming faintly. Pipes lined the walls like ribs in an animal's chest. Eventually, the corridor widened, and I found myself stepping onto a cracked subway platform, like someone knew I was there. I froze, heart suddenly loud and... My chest power shouldn't have been live. The station was decommissioned, sealed off since the 80s, and yet the fluorescents buzzed and popped above me. I walked slowly down the platform, scanning everything. The place was a time capsule. Old posters peeling off the tile, rust-covered benches, graffiti on every surface. But not the usual kind. No tags, no cartoons, just words, one phrase. Over and over, don't stay past the second sound. Painted, scratched, written in Sharpie, in chalk, even carved into the tiles with something sharp. Always the same phrase. Sometimes crooked, sometimes overlapping, but always there. It was like the walls were screaming it at me. I should have left. I know that now. But curiosity is a hell of a drug. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The signal was gone, as expected. I made notes of air moisture and ventilation issues, cracked piping, fungal growth near the tunnel arch. Then I heard the first sound. It wasn't a clang or screech, like you'd expect underground. It was a tone, long, low, resonant. It seemed to vibrate through the floor and into my legs. I turned toward the tunnel. Nothing there, just darkness. The sound faded. Silence returned. I waited a few seconds, then shrugged it off and snapped a few. More photos. That's when I noticed the claw marks. 3 deep gouges running parallel down a concrete support beam. Then more on a metal bench. Then dozens scratched into the tile wall, as if something had raked across it over and over. The scratches were old. Some rusted over, but some looked fresh. Something scraped through the dirt on the platform floor, too, like something dragged. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up, and then I heard the second sound, louder, higher in pitch. Almost metallic it came, from deep inside the tunnel. This time, the lights cut out. All of them, gone. My headlamp flicked on automatically, casting a narrow cone. The beam trembled as my hand shook. That's when I saw movement, just beyond the edge of my light. Something retreated into the shadows. I didn't get a good look. All I saw was that it was tall, slouched, fast, too fast for its size, and the air suddenly felt too warm. I started backing away. Flashlight pointed toward the tunnel. Then something echoed behind me, scraping. I turned, nearly dropped the light. More. Scratches, fresh. On the tile just feet away from where I had entered, and then I heard it. A breath, not mine, slow, wet, close. I bolted. Back through the corridor, my boots pounded through puddles, slamming into concrete with each panicked step. I didn't care about photos, notes, anything. I just wanted out. Something followed. I could hear it. Not footsteps exactly. More like dragging, scraping, but always just behind me. The shaft appeared ahead. I climbed so fast I nearly fell. My hands slipped on the rusted rungs, but I didn't stop. I slammed the maintenance door shut and twisted the lock. For a second I thought I was safe, until I heard it again. That second tone, but this time it was behind the door. I ran out of the station. Into the hot daylight. I don't remember if I screamed, but people stared. I got in my van and drove. I didn't stop until I hit the interstate. I didn't go back to the office. I sent my boss an email saying the shaft was blocked off. Couldn't access it, never heard back. Maybe he didn't care. Maybe he knew. A week later, I checked the job logs. There was no record of the Roosevelt substation in the system, none like it had been wiped. But here's the worst part. About 3 months after that, I saw a news blurb. A kid had gone missing while exploring an abandoned section of the subway. The picture showed the graffiti behind the boy's smiling face. Don't stay past the second sound. I still dream about it sometimes. I hear that tone again, and sometimes, in those dreams, the lights don't go out. They flicker, and I see it, tall, bent, watching, waiting for that second sound.